All right, so, we love a good deep dive. And this time we're really wading into the deep end
Hmm.
with this AI-generated content stuff. It's everywhere you look online these days. And honestly, it's got me wondering if seeing is really believing anymore.
Yeah, you're not alone in feeling that way. I think a lot of folks are feeling that right now, and rightfully so. I mean, it used to be AI was like, writing bad poetry or generating kind of trippy images, but now it's like
Yeah.
full on creating stuff that looks and sounds so real you can't even tell the difference. I mean,
Right. And that's what's so freaky about it, right? It's like one thing to see a funny deepfake video, right? But when you're talking about the potential for AI to be used for things like election manipulation or creating these really convincing scams, it's like a whole other level of unsettling.
yeah, it really makes you question everything you see and hear online now, doesn't it?
It totally does. And the thing that gets me is I feel like I'm usually pretty good at spotting fakes online. I'm always like, check the source, look for the telltale signs. But with this AI stuff, it's like all bets are off.
Yeah, our brains just aren't wired to process this level of sophistication yet. We're
Yeah.
used to looking for those little glitches or inconsistencies to tell us if something's fake. But now that AI is getting so good, it's like those glitches are disappearing.
Exactly. And what's scary is I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah,
As AI keeps getting more and more advanced, it's only going to get harder to separate fact from fiction.
absolutely. And that's why I think it's so crucial that we're having this conversation now, before things get even more out of hand.
Right, because ignorance is not bliss when it comes to AI.
Hmm.
It's like we need to be proactive about educating ourselves and figuring out ways to navigate this new landscape where, seeing isn't necessarily believing anymore.
100%. We're going to have to adapt our thinking and be a lot more discerning about what we trust online.
And speaking of trust, it's interesting that some of the big tech companies are actually starting to take this whole AI detection thing pretty seriously, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I read that Google, Meta, OpenAI, they're all investing in ways to identify this AI-generated content.
They are, which
That's
is encouraging to see. I think they're realizing that for AI to be truly useful and for people to trust it, there needs to be a way to know when you're looking at something generated by a machine versus a human.
right. It's like that whole organic label you see on food now. People want to know where things come from and what they're made of, and it seems like digital content is heading in that same direction.
Yeah, I think transparency is going to be key here.
Totally. So how are they actually doing this? Like, what are the nuts and bolts of AI detection? I read that Meta, those are the Facebook and Instagram folks for in which you needs a refresher, are working on flagging AI content on their platforms. Imagine scrolling through your feed and next to that hilarious cat video, there's a tag that says made with AI. The internet's about to get even weirder.
It is, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about, but it also makes sense.
Yeah.
If they can get out ahead of this and build that transparency into their platforms, maybe they can get people used to the idea of AI generated content without freaking everyone out.
Right, because it's not all bad, right? It's
Yeah.
like anything else. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
And how we use that tool, well, that's the real question.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between harnessing the potential of AI while also being aware of its limitations and potential for misuse.
Totally. So we've got Meta tackling the social media side of things.
Mhm.
But what about Google? What are they doing about all of this?
Well, Google's bread and butter is search, right? So naturally, they're laser focused on making sure their search results aren't flooded with AI spun articles and websites.
Oh, yeah, that would be a nightmare. Can you imagine every time you Googled something, all you got were these AI-generated pages that all kind of sounded the same? Talk about information overload.
Exactly. And remember, Google's influence goes way beyond just search. Think about all the other places they touch: online news aggregation, advertising, even academic research. So they're working on safeguards to make sure people know what they're looking at across all of their platforms.
So it's like they're becoming the internet's fact checkers in the age of AI.
Yeah. In a way, they are, because if people lose faith in the information they find through Google, that has a ripple effect on everything.
Okay, so we've got Meta tackling the social media side of things. Google's got search on lockdown. But what about OpenAI? They're the ones who unleashed ChatGPT on the world, right?
They did. And even they seem to be realizing that they might have opened Pandora's box. The articles you sent mention that they're developing something like a fingerprint for their AI's work.
A fingerprint.
Yeah.
Like a digital watermark so you can tell if a blog post or a news story was written by a human or by ChatGPT.
Precisely. It's a fascinating approach because it's like they're trying to bake transparency into the AI itself right from the source.
That's really cool, actually. I like that idea of baking transparency right into the AI. But with all of these big players working on solutions, is it actually realistic? I mean, creating a foolproof, universal AI detection system, it feels like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
It's a huge undertaking, for sure. You've got these incredibly complex algorithms that are constantly learning and evolving, different companies, each taking their own approach. And then there's the sheer volume of content being created every single second. It's like a digital arms race almost.
It really is.
Yeah.
And to stretch that analogy even further, it's like we're trying to figure out the rules of engagement while we're building the weapons A&D, fighting the war at the same time.
Mm.
I mean, what about the potential downsides of all this tracking and labeling? I can see the argument for wanting to identify AI-generated content, especially if it's being used to spread misinformation or create those scary real deepfakes. But where do we draw the line? What about our privacy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? On the one hand, we want to protect ourselves from being manipulated or misled by AI-generated content. But on the other hand, we don't want to end up in a world where our online activity is constantly being monitored and scrutinized under the guise of AI detection. It's a tough needle to thread, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like we're almost back to that whole debate about security versus freedom. How much are we willing to give up in the name of safety?
Exactly. And the stakes are so high. Because once we start going down that road of giving up our privacy, it can be really hard to turn back.
I read one article that talked about how some of these AI detection tools could potentially be used to censor legitimate content. Like, what if a piece of satire or a work of art that uses AI gets flagged and taken down because the system misinterprets it? It's almost like we need a whole new set of rules for the digital age.
We might, and that's where things get really interesting. It's not just about the technology itself, but the ethical considerations, the social impact, the legal ramifications. It's a whole new frontier. We're entering uncharted territory here.
It definitely feels that way. So we've talked about the challenges, the potential pitfalls.
Yeah.
But what about the flip side? What about the opportunities that come with all of this? What has you most hopeful about the future of AI, even with all of these challenges?
Well, it's like we were talking about earlier, this technology is moving so fast. How can we even keep up? It's like we come up with a solution and it's obsolete before we even have a chance to implement it.
That's the challenge, isn't it? But you know what gives me hope? People are starting to wise up to this whole AI thing. They're not just blindly trusting everything they see online anymore.
Yeah, that's true. It's like that old saying, don't believe everything you read on the internet has taken on a whole new meaning.
Exactly. And that's where the real power lies, I think.
Hmm.
In empowering individuals to be more discerning, more skeptical. We need to move beyond just trusting what we see and hear and develop that healthy dose of digital skepticism.
So it's not just about the tech companies creating these elaborate detection systems. It's about each of us becoming more aware and informed consumers of online content. 100%. We need to approach the online world with the same critical thinking skills we use in other parts of our lives. Question your sources, consider different perspectives. Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper if something seems off.
Basically, channel your inner internet detective.
Exactly. Put those sleuthing skills to work.
So what you're saying is the future of the internet and our ability to trust what we see and read online really depends on us. That's actually a pretty empowering thought when you put it that way.
It is empowering because it means we have agency. We're not just passive consumers of whatever the algorithms throw at us. We can choose to be informed. We can demand transparency. We can hold these companies accountable.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of AI-generated content, it seems like the challenge isn't just about building better tech, but about building a better digital future for ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about creating a digital world where AI can reach its full potential without compromising our values or our ability to trust what we see and hear online.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this thought. The next time you're scrolling through your feed and something makes you stop and wonder, is this real? Take a moment to really consider that question. You might be surprised by what you discover. Until next time, stay curious.